Hi all. So we are going to discuss today the article of Bubandt, which is called "Interview with an Ancestor's Spirits as Informants and the Politics of Possession in North Maluku." So North Maluku is situated in Indonesia, and the region that he's talking about specifically is an island called Ternate. Yeah, local island called Ternate. So we still continue with the theme of how do anthropologists look at societies, people, group of people who are very different to their own? Yeah. So anthropologists who are usually brought up in secular Western education, how do they study societies who are outside of this Western context? And so Bubandt has a different approach than Nadasti, and he's talking about a way of government, a local government of sultanates in Ternate, yeah. So he's saying that one of the ways, influential ways that the officials take decisions is through separate positions, like the meetings of usual official meeting would take place through spirit possessions, and ancestors who have been sultanates before, or ancestors, so important ancestors, possess the individuals, and the same individual can be possessed by different ancestors. And he was giving the example of 12 spirits possessing one person. Yeah. Um, And he's saying, or he's proposing, is that anthropologists should take spirits as informants and take them seriously. And he's saying that we need to take them methodologically real, and we should not worry about taking them as ontologically real. And I think Alexandria, one of the great questions that Alexandria asked is, what is the difference between the two? So I think the one, and he's not dwelling on this enough. So he's saying that I'm not gonna go into the questions of, oh, is this real? Like, are they really possessed by the spirits, or are they kind of faking to be possessed by spirits to manipulate their answers? Yeah, and he's saying that the other anthropologists who have been studying these kinds of cultures and practices, they did think from that perspective that, oh, actually people are faking or people are manipulating politics through separate possessions, yeah. And I think he's saying that it's very difficult for Western men to take them ontologically real. Yeah. So what he means by that is that I'm not going to question, or I'm not going to take a side about if this really happens, or if I really believe in what's happening. Yeah. It is none of my business, because I'm trying to understand the politics of the region, and it is enough for me to take them as informants, as any other informant, as the living people. Yeah, I'm going to take the ancestor who possessed the individual during the meeting as individual. And this is very different than Nadasti's approach that Nadasti named as radical participation. Yeah, Nadasti was kind of inviting us to take a positive step in believing this very foreign practices to our practices. Yeah. And he's saying that this is challenging the act of taking the spirits seriously and as informants, challenging the idea of the bounded secular self. Yeah. So let's go to the end of 296. That's where he kind of nicely lays out the project. So at the end of the page, where it starts as the subtitle Spirits, Multiple Subjectivities and the Problem of the Informant. Regarding the spirits of the afternoon as informants does present a challenge, however. The multiplicity of the spirit appearances would appear to confound the traditional concept of the informant with its implicit, but as far as I've been able to ascertain, also unquestioned association with individual and living subjects. The idea of the coherent and singular informant inhabiting one body is thus challenged by the 12 spirits who possessed Ibulan, and who each in their own right were historical persons that could be treated as positioned informants. I argue that the idea of treating these spirits as informants is only counterintuitive because the category of the informant remains linked to conventional philosophical ideals about the bounded self. The vestige of individualism that continues to inform the concept of informant is odd. The individualism sits awkwardly with the recent attempts in anthropology and elsewhere to rethink the notion of the subject and the self. And it goes, the goal of this trend has been exactly to move beyond implicit assumptions about universal individualism by highlighting the complexity and multiplicity of personhood, selfhood, and subjectivity. So, I think what he's saying is very interesting, and he kind of says that this idea that one person has one subjectivity and there is a one bounded self is a fiction. He implies that this is a fiction that we take very seriously, as to not to take spirits as informants because they kind of challenges this idea of one bounded self. Yeah, and also he says, and I think Amanda and Eilish points this out, that not only in separate position but also in different areas of life we do not perform a bounded uniform whole self. Yeah, like when you look at Bubandt is saying, when you look at people with dissociative identity disorder, voice hearers, soothsayer, or channelers, but also like in everyday life, we kind of express ourselves in very different ways that do not amount to this whole uniformed self. Yeah, and I really like the what Eilish wrote in her reflection paper, so I'm just gonna quote her. No one person is entirely consistent with a single personality. I felt that this perspective was helpful in that it humanized spirits and allowed them to be taken seriously and as political actors. So when you think of the idea that a person is different and self-expression is very different from one time to time and in different contexts, so this kind of spectacle of spirit possession can be thought not as extraordinary or as supernatural as we tend to think it. Yeah, and I think this is a interesting point to make. Also, other questions that Alexandria brings, that she says Bubandt is not dwelling or elaborating on enough on the history and religion of these people. Yeah, and I agree with that, but he kind of points that the local government of Sultanate was abolished with the Dutch colonization. Yeah, and after the colonization officially ended, the first 50 years the local government of Sultanate didn't come back, but in 1998 local Sultanate came back. And They have their belief system is Sufism, he says. So Sufism can be thought of as a spiritual Islam, and I could kind of give some more background on Sufism because I happen to know that, but I don't understand, or as far as I know, the link between Sufism and the spirit possessions are not very clear to me neither. And Bubandt, I don't think, makes that link for us. But these practices that they come back with 1998, the local sultanate, they deemed superstitional backwards by a certain group of people. But Bubandt says actually when you look at them, they can also be considered a bit counter-hegemonic or resistance to the remaining effects of colonization because they have strong links with local history and local culture. Yeah? And I'm gonna just read what he says in the beginning of the conclusion. 312. So this article has sought to answer the following question: what might an anthropological theory of politics look like that begins not from the commonsensical notion that spirits are instruments of manipulation and power, but from the fieldwork experience that spirits in possession have a body and a voice of their own? Yeah. So that is his kind of central question in the article. And I think what I want to ask you guys to comment on can be, what do you think of the difference between Nadasti and Bubandt's approach? Like, what do you think of radical participation on the one hand and taking spirits methodologically real instead of ontologically real? Would be my question.